Hi, my name is Jason, and today I'm going to show you how to make biscuits from scratch. Not only are biscuits some of the most delicious things you could ever make, but I think they're a pretty good introduction, a good toe in the water of baking, and especially with bread, quick bread like this. So the ingredients are incredibly simple. It's a short list. I've got 2 cups of all-purpose flour in the bowl here. In this little guy, I've got a tablespoon each of granulated sugar and baking powder. This is 1 stick of butter, frozen and grated. I'll come back to that in a second. And this is just 3/4 cup of milk. You could use buttermilk, you could use almond milk, you could use an alternative milk for this as well. For me, I had milk, so I used milk. The one thing I do want to point out about cups and cups for liquid and not liquids, I guess, if you're using something like flour, sugar, something along those lines, you be sure to use these sort of measuring cups. This measuring cup that has milliliters on it is only for liquids. Don't measure solids in this. Please don't measure liquids in this. If you do, your recipe will turn out slightly wrong, and in baking, it really is a game of inches. So with all of these ingredients, we're gonna mix them all together, make a biscuit dough. I've also got about 3/4 cup of flour here because we'll need that later for dusting and kind of working the dough together. So to make a biscuit, all you really need to do, you've got your dry ingredients, which is flour, baking powder, and sugar. We're gonna mix that in with, there's also about 1/2 teaspoon of salt in here. I'll put the recipe in the description of the video. So you just put this all together, your dry ingredients in a bowl, take a fork, mix them up. You're just looking for a relatively even distribution. Just consider the fact that you don't really want one bite of your biscuit to have a bunch of salt, for example, or be under-seasoned. So you just kind of give it a little bit of a mix. If you wanted to put this through a sifter or a colander or a sieve to really get it together, you can. I don't think you need to, but if you want to, go ahead. The next step is adding our butter. And I told you I'd get back to the butter because the temperature of your butter is crucially important. So this is called cutting butter into your dough. So what you've got is your dry ingredients here, and you've got your butter here. All I did was take a stick of butter, this is 1/2 cup or 1 stick of butter, grated it on a box grater, just like you would cheese or anything else that you're grating, until you get these little curls. Then you put this back in the freezer. You don't really want to take it out of the freezer until you're ready to work with it. So this butter is going to go in here. What you're going to do is mix it together with your hands and kind of get it together so that it looks almost like cornmeal. So I'm going to do that right now. So right now in this bowl, I've got my frozen butter going in. It's pretty, again, it's important to make sure that this is really, really gold because when you cut it in, you're going to get an even distribution of the butter. Again, just use your hands for this. But you want to make sure that your butter is as evenly distributed as possible with working it as little as possible. So you don't really want to be all over this dough. You want to make sure that you're kind of using it, using your hands to get everything distributed, but as gingerly as possible, because every time you go to touch a little bit of this butter, it will start to kind of warm up and melt, and that's not what you want. So as this is in, the nice thing about grating it versus cutting it when it's cold is that it distributes itself pretty quickly. So what you're looking for is cracker meal almost, like kind of, imagine you take a sleeve of Ritz crackers or something like that and you mash it up. That's kind of what this will end up looking like. So you don't want big pieces, nothing bigger than, they always say pea size, that's about what you want, nothing bigger than that. If they're a little smaller, that's fine, it'll still distribute pretty evenly. Once that's done, which we are, we take our milk. You want to make sure that when you add your milk, you're ready to do this all the way. Because once you add liquid to baking powder, it activates. It's going to start bubbling. It's going to start bringing the leavening agent to your biscuit. And that's part of what's going to make it so light and fluffy and delicious. So when you add your milk, put a little bit of a well in the center like that, so that you've got a little landing point for your milk. You'll toss all of this in once. And then we can pick our fork back up, and you're just gonna slowly incorporate that liquid into your dry ingredients. It's always wet into dry. It makes for the easiest congregation of everything, let's say. So almost immediately, I've got big chunks of dough that aren't all together, but once I come in here just a little bit, you'll see that it can basically hold shape when you squeeze it. That's all we're looking for. Again, we want to work this dough as little as possible. So now I've got all that flour that I had off to the side for a reason. We're going to flour our work surface. So from on high, just give it a little sprinkle all over. Dump out your dough. And again, see, this is like, that doesn't look like a dough at all, but it is. Give it just a second. And as you press it together, you're going to see that it comes together. There's going to be parts that are a little bit wetter and parts that are a little bit drier. That's okay. After about 20, 30 seconds of getting this mashed, for lack of a better term, you will have a biscuit dough. And just like that, biscuit dough. So what we're going to do next is let this rest in the fridge for just about 10 or 15 minutes so that that butter really chills down again. And we come back, we're going to get it rolled out and cut. With our dough rested, I'm gonna roll it out now, and then we'll do some folds to get some layers and all kinds of good stuff. So first things first, just give yourself a little bit of flour on top of the dough, flip it over, give yourself a little bit more flour here. You don't wanna over flour because you don't want a dry biscuit, but you don't want to work with anything that's too super wet. So, got our rolling pin. We're gonna roll this out into approximately a rectangle. Doesn't have to be exact, obviously you're not gonna get sharp edges, but you just want it to be about maybe 12 inches by 14 inches, something like that, so that you can fold your dough. And the reason that we fold the dough, as you do it, you'll see you're literally creating layers. So those really fluffy biscuit layers, layers to a biscuit, as you pull it apart, this is how you get that. So I've got it about where I want it. It's a little smaller maybe, but you don't want to overwork the dough. So once I've got my rectangle as such, we're gonna fold over one side, and then we're gonna fold over the other side. We're gonna give this a little bit of a pat down, and then we roll it out to a rectangle again. So that, as you can see, once you've got something flat and you've got it folded over, now we've got 3 layers of biscuit dough. And again, we're not trying to roll this out too severely, but we do want it to be as close to a rectangle as possible. So as you're going, right now my bottom of this dough feels a little sticky. So I'm gonna flip it over, dust it with just a touch more flour so that it doesn't stick, and continue rolling. So I've got it down to, again, a decent rectangle shape. It's never gonna be a perfect rectangle, so that's not anything that you're gonna have to worry about, but you want it to be close. So we'll do that one more time. We fold it over, and we fold it over. We'll give it a little bit of flour on top. If you want, you can stop now. You can roll this out just a little bit, and you'll be fine. I'm gonna go one more time because I like really fluffy layered biscuits.